and then we'll also go back to Georgia for the private service this evening in Plains. What a contrast as you look at the magnificent National Cathedral here, to think of this is how the day is beginning, and it'll end in a small hometown church in Plains, Georgia, that he taught Sunday school in for so many years, drawn people from all over the world to come and hear his messages. And the message of faith will be front and center through this service today. Hymns that the former president picked out, Amazing Grace will be one you'll hear towards the beginning of the service. Another will be All Is Well with My Soul. The president also often talked about the fact that this might be the end of his life on this earth, but he felt certain that there was a life beyond where he'd be connected with Rosalynn once again, as we see the hearse there and the casket, the flag-draped casket behind. Aisha and Jeff, as I stand here and just look around and see, you just feel such a reverence from everyone here on the lawn of the National Cathedral, a deep respect, a moment of pause to take in history in this moment and this day, but also all of the days leading up to this moment, and why it does have such a depth of an impact because of someone's life work that was so far-reaching, yet so connected and personal in each kind of touch he made along the way.
And sure, there is sadness and there is great mourning, especially amongst the family and, you know, close family members and friends. President Carter and Rosalynn kept such close ties, such close knits with their network. But there's something to be said about a man that we just saw in previous video, Jeff, who literally had a smile on his face talking about death being imminent for him after that cancer diagnosis. And he was just so peaceful with his God and with his faith and how he'd lived his life, and just had a smile on his face. And he said, you know, I think my wife may not feel the same, but this is where I am. And just that personal relationship that he had with God, and to know how he felt about it, but still went on to live, what, 10 or 12 more years beyond that moment.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter never showed any fear of anything, really. I mean, and much has been made of his deep Christian faith and his understanding of Scripture, and as it relates to mortality and all of these sorts of issues that we all wrestle with, particularly as we get older. We no longer can put off these thoughts of our own demise, but Jimmy Carter was one that was always out front, more than willing to talk about it, and he framed it within, you know, the accomplishments, the successes, the failures of his life, and it was always stirring to hear him talk about issues of mortality. I was in Plains after the Emory diagnosis that the cancer had spread to his brain almost 10 years ago, and to listen to him that day as he spoke to those inside the church was amazing. He spoke on subjects as diverse as sex, as the Bible, and death, and he joked about all of them, and he did it with great aplomb and great sense of humor and a great sense of self. And I mean, that's what's always so amazing about Jimmy Carter, you know, listening to him speak on all of these subjects that have been vexing for all of us, you know, whether it's spirituality or you know, specifics of government or the human condition or any of those kinds of things. And he was able to take on these issues and make some sense out of them, and to express them in a way that the rest of us could understand.
We are looking live here at the National Cathedral. This is Walker's Court, which is in front of the cathedral, as we see members of the military awaiting as the motorcade and the hearse carrying the body of former President Jimmy Carter has arrived there in front of the National Cathedral for a national funeral service there that we will bring you live here on 11 Alive as we await for the body to exit the vehicle and to be carried inside what is surely just a national landmark here in such
it's such a beautiful church. I mean, the stained glass
very
inside.
Beautiful.
And I was looking at a list here as we're seeing these scenes of those who are buried in there or are interned, from President Woodrow Wilson to, I'm seeing Cordell Hull, who was the U.S. Secretary of State during World War II, who was so instrumental in FDR's administration, and Helen Keller, of course, the author, lecturer, advocate for the blind and deaf, and also Matthew Shepard's ashes are interned there. He was the victim of the hate crime in Wyoming, the LGBTQ who was the victim of a hate crime a number of years ago. And it is a very, very diverse group of Americans who have been interned or buried inside this national cathedral.
I think President Carter would be proud of that, and proud to be among a very diverse and inclusive group of people here. But as we know, the journey will end in Plains, Georgia. It is going to be a long day as we mark this moment from the nation's capital. That is where we find 11 Alive News anchor Faith Jesse there. Faith, what are you seeing from your point of view right now?
Well, as the motorcade left the Capitol, we saw that cannons being blasted out there at the Capitol. We did see some security detail move from this area. We imagine it's going down closer to the cathedral as this area is getting cleared and that motorcade is going that way. What we are also seeing are a lot of people who are hoping to get a glimpse of the cannon salute. Like I said, it happened right at 9 a.m. We saw the blast, and we did have a small group of people here just kind of standing on, looking as the sun came over the Capitol, hoping to get a glimpse of President Carter as the motorcade left this area, going past the White House and down to the cathedral. Right now, it's starting to, like I said, that security detail moving towards the cathedral now as the service is set to begin in just a few minutes here. We do know that there is going to be just a beautiful display of remembrance, a beautiful speeches from his grandson Jason Carter as well as President Biden. But right now, once again, the Capitol, where he's been lying in state for the last couple of days, the scene here starting to clear. There are still a couple of onlookers just trying to take in the last little bit, but that has now moved down, transitioned to where Cheryl is over at the National Cathedral.
All right, Faith, thank you from that vantage point there. And people have lined the streets of that motorcade here, making its way here on the National Cathedral, right out in front of the area that's referred to as Walker's Court, where we will see the Carter family, including the grandchildren who will serve as honorary pallbearers. As dignitaries, family members, Carter Center employees, members of the military, Secret Service, and their loved ones have all taken their seats inside ahead of the funeral services